on BBC Radio 5 Sports Extra.
5 rounds to go in this fast and furious Formula One season, and we've hopped over the border from Texas to Mexico at the Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez circuit, I should say. I tried too hard with the accent there, We're in Mexico City ahead of round 20 of the championship, and after Austin, Max Verstappen's advantage at the top has extended to 57 points ahead of Lando Norris. But with new upgrades for McLaren and a tough track that lies over 2,000 metres above sea level, will we get some more enthralling action across the next couple of days? To guide you through all the action is myself, Harry Benjamin. Alongside me is former driver and broadcaster Tom Gaymore and the BBC's F1 correspondent Andrew Benson. And ahead of us, an extended FP2 session. Welcome to Pirelli tyre testing live. Andrew Benson, can you explain to us what's going on across the course of the next 90 minutes?
Well, I was just about to update the audience with the knowledge that Alex Albon will be missing the start of this session because his car was badly damaged in the first practice session with a crash with Ollie Bearman in the Ferrari. They're testing some tyres, Harry. You know, I mean, that's what it boils down to. There is a proper practice session going on as well. Okay, so people will get to see, you know, setup work. Not that setup work's very exciting. They all get to see qualifying runs. They all get to the long run corner, hopefully, which I know makes the producer happy. But in amongst all of that, there's an extra half an hour for our delectation, in which the drivers all get 2 sets of tyres. They haven't told us which compound, but one of them is identical to the 2024 tyres and one is a new development tyre for 2025. They have to do a performance run, i.e. 1 lap, and a longer run on both of those sets of tyres in addition to their normal work. But let's not get bogged down in all that, Harry. Let's just... One thing. Does this... You're about to get bogged down in all that,
Does this pose a bigger question of, you know, why does this have to take up an FP2 session? Could this not... Is this indicative of a wider need for Pirelli to have more private testing and not being given it?
I don't really want to get bogged down in Pirelli right now, given that we've got an hour and a half getting bogged down in Pirelli, okay? But, look, Pirelli are constantly saying they need more testing, and they would know, they're the tyre supplier. They do get quite a lot of testing, 20-something days with teams during the season. But, you know, when you've got 20 cars all together on the track, and it is a racetrack that they use, and it is a race weekend, that is going to be valuable data. So, you know, there are always... Pirelli tyres came into Formula 1 in 2011. They've been battling the same problems for the last 13 years. The tyres overheat a bit too much. They need to be run at too high a pressure, or a higher pressure than the teams and drivers would like, to stop them from exploding, basically. And they have too narrow an operating window. And they're trying to improve all of those characteristics of the tyres. Whether they make a substantive difference for next season, we'll have to wait and see.
Thus concludes the getting bogged down in Pirelli tyres there. But that gives you a little indication of what's to come throughout the next 90 or so minutes around this circuit. 4.3 kilometres, just over that, 2.6 miles, 20 corners, 7 to the left and 10 to the right. Get up to some high speeds here, over 340 kilometres an hour. It's a really interesting circuit, isn't it, Tom? Because we've got the altitude to contend with, a couple of tight, twisty sectors. In the middle sectors, the fast S-like corners where we saw Albon and Bearman have their collision, and of course that long back straight as well, or start finish straight I should say.
Yeah, this is 4.304 kilometres, as you said, the third shortest track on the calendar. It's high altitude, it's low air density. What does that mean? Well, essentially it impacts the power unit most. The turbocharger has to make up for that power loss, has to work harder, and then it's one of those sort of conundrums for the engineers, because you've got the Monaco style downforce. It's the only other circuit where we sort of run that full downforce, if you like, but you've got Monza style speeds, 346 kilometers at the end of the straight. So you know, from an engineer's perspective, that is something to get your head around. Also, the track evolution is quite substantial. We saw in FP1 the plumes of dust and sand, more than we'd see in the desert at Bahrain or anything like that, as the cars went off track. We saw lots of cars making mistakes, drivers working hard behind the wheel, and we saw that crash between Albon and Behrman as well. Look who's out on track, Lando Norris. We haven't seen him, nor have we seen Charles Leclerc, Lewis Hamilton, Fernando Alonso or Zhou Guanyu.
No, we had 5 FP1 drivers: Pato O'Ward, Felipe Drugovich, Robert Schwartzman, Kimi Antonelli and Oliver Behrman all take their places for their rookie outings in FP1. But the clock has now counted down and we have gone green at the end of the pit lane with an hour and 29 minutes with 22, 21, 20 seconds remaining of free practice 2 as they all flurry out. Indeed, Lando Norris, the first car out on track, but Lando Norris, after that US Grand Prix, is now 57 points behind Max Verstappen, who tops the table. Charles Leclerc is a further 22 points behind Norris in third, ahead of Oscar Piastri. Carlos Sainz rounds out the top 5. And over in the constructors, what we really do have a bit of a three-way battle developing. McLaren currently lead the way, 40 points clear of Red Bull in second, and Red Bull are under pressure for that P2 slot, because after their 1-2 in Austin, Ferrari are now just 8 points behind. Then comes Mercedes and Aston Martin, a bit on their own in 4th and 5th. Haas head the battle in the midfield in that coveted 6th place. They are only, though, 2 points ahead of RB, who themselves are only 19 points ahead of Williams, who are a further 4 points ahead of Alpine, with Sauber still the only team yet to get off the mark after 19 rounds of races in what is looking like it will be one of their worst seasons in Formula One, as they slowly morph into Audi over the next couple of years. But they are only 13 off of Alpine, so all it takes is a bit of a chaotic race, and who knows, perhaps Sauber might well be up there. But this is a big weekend, isn't it, for Lando Norris and McLaren? The championship is still technically alive, but it's a big gap for Norris to overhaul, and really he has to win and hope Verstappen doesn't really score any points, especially Andrew after last weekend with that penalty given to Norris for gaining an advantage by going off track. That conversation is still continuing, isn't it?
Indeed, the right of review hearing took place, or at least the start of the right of review hearing took place between the first and second practice sessions today. We haven't heard anything from the FIA on that yet. These things don't normally get overturned, by the way, so any McLaren fans shouldn't get their hopes up. Lando Norris is out on the track. You can hear him now. He could really do with that hearing going his way, but because it would be, a significant point swing. What would it be, 6 points actually, when you take the 3 off Verstappen and give him the 3, but as I said, I think it's happening. We've been given an extremely interesting bit of paper by the producer, haven't we, Harry? So we can tell you that Lando Norris is out on test tyres. They're unmarked, like all test tyres are from Pirelli, and his test tyres are the C5 compound, and he has to do his first run on the option, which is presumably the new tyre, which is what he's doing right now, and then the second run for him on the base tyre. So it looks like Norris and McLaren have chosen to get those runs out of the way early doors. I can't quite see which Ferrari that was that left, which tyres they were on, but we've got Perez coming through now. He's also on the option tyre, on the test tyre, and for him it is the option again on run 1. He's on the C5.
I think it was Carlos Sainz in the Ferrari who came out of the pits down towards turn 1. He's on the base tyre, so the current tyre, before he switches on to the option for his second run plan. So this is going to be quite a useful test, actually, really, for Pirelli going for next year, as they try and test their softest compounds in the range for 2025. And if you heard right at the start of the show, the background chanting for Sergio Perez, of course the home hero, he has just gone out onto the track as well, and has gone second fastest with a 1:19.056. Perez running that option tyre, the C5 tyre, first of all. But I mean, Tom, I want to just come back and see off again this chat about what's the incident between Lando Norris and Max Verstappen. So to my understanding, effectively people aren't saying there's anything wrong with Norris getting a penalty. That was a slam dunk in him going off the track and gaining an advantage. But is there something to be said with the fact that Verstappen was able to almost run him off the track and not get any kind of recompense for it?
Well, I think the contentious point is people are cheesed off that Lando's got a penalty because they think he was forced off track. And I think that's the nuance. Did he drive off track, i.e. elect to stay in that overtake mode too long when the gap was always closing, when Max was always going to drive him off, so there was never ever going to be any option on the exit of the corner because he wasn't all the way around the outside. He certainly wasn't ahead at the apex, so that's the nuance. Perez radio.
The brake pedal feels a little bit stiff.
Well, Perez there with a stiff brake pedal. These systems will have been played and changed during free practice 1 to free practice 2, so just a little bit uncomfortable with what he's got under his left foot. But yeah, going back to that, so that's the nuance. Was he driven off, or did he elect to stay in it too long? But what we didn't talk about in FP1, which I'd like to talk about, it is actually the track layout as well and the track design, because yes, we can talk about rules and regulations, and I think Yuki Tsunoda said, you know, we're going to be AI robots at this rate, or, you know, Max Verstappen said, I'm going to have a book in the car with me if this continues. Are we in danger of being over-regulated? Is it trying to be too binary and objective when essentially we didn't have all these problems and discussions when the tracks were laid out and designed differently with gravel and grass? Now, I know we've moved away from that for various different reasons. They're well documented, but it's an important point for me.
Well, is it though? I mean, it is to a degree. I mean, all the drivers are saying it, and the fact that so the issue with the incident in Austin was that Verstappen also went off the track, and most of the drivers are saying that they don't approve of the way he drives in these situations. What they're basically doing is, Lewis Hamilton puts it, he just throws the car up the inside and takes both people off. He said he did it to me in 21. Brazil was the most famous example, but there were others, and he's been doing it for years. And there is a grey area, and Hamilton says it is a grey area because he's kept getting away with it, in Hamilton's words. Most of the drivers yesterday were agreeing with that point of view. They think that shouldn't be allowed. But so that would be removed, that possibility would be removed by having gravel off the track, both cars going off. But it wouldn't stop Verstappen forcing people off the track. Here's some radio from Verstappen, ironically.
I still hear a weird noise. Any engine.
So
we're happy for you to continue at the moment, Max.
That's a reference to earlier. Verstappen's P1 ended early because of a loose, an engine problem which Red Bull haven't revealed, but Automotor and Sports say was a leak in a turbo air pipe, which was relatively easily fixed. We'll have to wait and see whether that's true or not, whether as in terms of the easily fixing. But to go back to the overtaking thing, he could still force people off the track with gravel on the outside, and indeed, this wasn't gravel, this example, but a similar sort of thing happened in 2019 in Austria with Charles Leclerc and Verstappen. Verstappen won that race because he forced Leclerc off the track on the exit of turn 3. Now, there isn't gravel on the exit of turn 3, but there were at the time what they call banana curbs, which are sort of things that really do slow the cars down. So that did impede Leclerc at that moment. So I don't think that it is an answer, but I don't think it's the answer. I think the problem here is that the rules are not worded enough. Basically, the rules have been worded in a way that allows or even encourages Verstappen to drive that way because of this the way they've delineated these overtaking moves is to say that if someone's overtaking around the outside, they have to have their front axle ahead of the other car's front axle by the apex to be afforded racing room. Otherwise, it's the corner belongs to the driver on the inside. So Verstappen's gaming that rule by here's Verstappen's radio again.
This noise is very disturbing. This can't be normal.
Box, please, Max. Box.
Yeah, so it looks like that engine problem hasn't been so easily fixed after all. By letting off the brakes, making sure as a result he gets to the apex first, and then just taking both people off the track as a result. And Norris's argument is, by the way, I was already ahead of him on the straight, and he was when you look at the replays. And then Max only got to the apex because he braked too late to make the corner.
Defending with no intention to stay on track, is that a type of wording that maybe could be introduced, and would that solve any problems there?
I'm sure they could come up with a form of wording that says, if you go off the track defending, so if you go off the track defending, you're effectively you've gained an advantage by keeping your position unfairly. That's what the other drivers are saying. So you should be forced to give it back. So you've got two situations here. Norris did overtake off the track. He says he was off the track only because Verstappen put him off the track. And Verstappen also, maybe he deserved a penalty, Norris, maybe he didn't. But Verstappen did force another driver off the track while defending. Maybe he should have had a penalty too. George Russell thinks he should have done.
Well, the sound you just heard was Max Verstappen underneath us. This was the sound of his engine. Let's just have a listen. Oh, here's his radio.
What the hell? The brakes didn't work at all.
And that was the sound of the Red Bull, who has now made it back to the pits and is being wheeled back into his garage. So that will be an absolute cause for concern for Red Bull and Max Verstappen as we wait to hear if McLaren's appeal does indeed come of anything. We'll keep you abreast of all of that as and when we get it. Just a reminder, no Alex Albon this session after that incident with Oliver Bearman during FP1. The stewards deemed that no one predominantly at fault for that one, and Oliver Bearman coming off slightly lighter in terms of damage. He's handed that car back to Charles Leclerc. Now Alex Albon with a lot of work being done on the front and the rear of that Williams.
Yeah, we heard Max Verstappen there complaining about the car not slowing down into turn one. What we see here, that is the peak in terms of braking energy down in turn one, but they don't really use the brake pedal much at all after turn 12. It's not, there's not a lot of braking, if any, through the complex, and you don't generate as much heat in the brakes as you would like around here. So it's a bit of a conundrum to keep that heat in the braking system. And if you don't have the brakes in the right operating window, of course you're going to suffer down at turn one. So I don't think he'll be the only driver to be complaining of that.
Just to go back to the Verstappen-Norris incident for a moment, it feels to me, I can't be sure about this, but it feels that we've reached a Rubicon. You know, that the drivers have been watching this happen for a long time, and I think it feels like they've all decided enough is enough. Something has to be done to stop this form of defensive driving becoming, acceptable.
Oh, we've got a car in the wall. It's George Russell who has found the wall down by turn, that's in the S's section, where we saw Alex Albon in FP1 in between 8 and 9. He's gone in what looks like side on, and he's well and truly wedged his Mercedes into the barrier. He's moving in the car, the steering wheel is out, he is getting out, but the front and the rear and the right hand side have taken an impact. And well, after a crash in qualifying last weekend ahead of the US Grand Prix, didn't have the parts for the upgrades that he was given that weekend coming into this weekend, and now, well, out of FP2. Red flag, everybody comes back into the pits, but Russell out and walking away.
So we've just seen a shot of Toto Wolff, the Mercedes team principal, in the pits, looking, I think rueful is the word, Harry, and I don't blame him. That's 3 days of track action in a row in which a Mercedes has crashed. In fact, it's 4, because Hamilton spun. He didn't crash Hamilton. Hamilton spun in turn 3 at Austin on Friday. Russell crashed in qualifying on Saturday at turn 19. Hamilton went off at turn 19 in the Grand Prix, and now Russell's gone off in the S's on Friday practice in Mexico. And
we'll wait to see this, but judging on where the skid marks, the black lines are, he's lost this car very, very early on the left-hand entry to turn 9. Obviously, there is a right-hand corner. Previously, you're coming through turn 7 and 8, but this is very, very similar to that sort of entry oversteer that we saw catch both drivers out last weekend.
Yes, and I think it's indicative of a wider problem at Mercedes. So they left Austin saying that they didn't think that the accidents had been caused by the floor necessarily, and they've come to Mexico saying this is a new floor that they introduced in Austin, which Russell's not using this weekend in Mexico, by the way, because he broke his in his qualifying crash in Austin. They felt, Russell was saying yesterday, that actually looking at the data, they were probably running the car too low in Austin, trying to be too ambitious with it. But I think the wider picture is George Russell and Lewis Hamilton are drivers of the absolute highest quality. For them to be crashing with this level of regularity, it has to be the car, surely. It has to be.
Just got a limp there, George Russell limping to the medical car. Looks okay, but just looking a bit ginger on that right leg. But you're absolutely right. And not only are they top caliber drivers in terms of their outright speed, but actually in terms of the way they look after their machinery. If you look at all of George's career and obviously Lewis's career in Formula One, you know, these are drivers that don't make these types of mistakes. We haven't seen a replay of the crash yet.
What does this say wider, though, about where the Mercedes team are? Because it wasn't that long ago where suddenly we were thinking, oh, Mercedes, hello, welcome back. They've finally found the North Star, and it seems to be consistent as we get another look at what happens. This is the sound of George Russell, Tom, just making his way up towards the first left-hander that takes you into the S's. Swings it to the right, takes that curb on the right-hand side, and then the car just spins out from underneath him, and it's a quick trip to the barrier.
Yeah, the curb doesn't really wholly unsettle the car, but it does enough. If you're running it that low, he takes enough of the curb to have it bouncing across. And we've seen other cars ride that curb, but he obviously, with that Mercedes running low, takes, well, it looks like far too much curb for the car, and that's actually what spun him to the inside. So it's a different dynamic in terms of what happened in Austin, because here he is bouncing across the curb.
Well, yes, except that's what happened to Hamilton on Friday in Austin. He hit the curb and started bouncing like that, and that's when he lost it. The turn 19 accidents were different, but also not that different in the sense that what Hamilton said yesterday about his accident in the race on Sunday, and he said, you know, I've never crashed in the race, and this is on lap 2, I wasn't even trying. He said they've reviewed the video. Yeah, he does get quite a long way over the curb, Russell, with quite a lot of the car. He's almost got the middle of the car over the curb. So I think you're right. Your phrase, he's taken too much of the curb for the car, Tom, as I think you pretty much nailed it. But so what Hamilton said about his crash at turn 19 was they could see the front left tyre jacking, so going up and down. And then at the same time, or maybe that instigated, the rear was bouncing, where they were getting like a ride height change of between 12 and 15 millimeters, Hamilton was saying. And it obviously, in a ground effect car that needs to be run flat to keep the aerodynamic downforce consistent from coming from under the car, he obviously just lost downforce. And it looks to me that that's exactly what's happened here. The car's started bouncing, maybe for a different reason, maybe not. He's hit the curb, bouncing, airflow goes, bang, in the barriers.
Are we heading back to square one almost here with Mercedes at the moment, scratching their heads again about where their upgrades are taking them?
Well, it is interesting, isn't it, that they did have that period from Spain until Spa, basically, where they were competitive. They won 3 out of 4 races. One was lucky because Russell inherited Austria after Verstappen and Norris crashed at the end of the race. But they did look properly competitive, and there was a massive amount of optimism at Mercedes at that time. And I remember thinking back to Miami, Toto Wolff back then was saying he felt that they'd got a development path now, and when they hit that run of form in the middle of the season, that's what they felt they found. They found the development path, we got the answers, we understand these cars finally. But then it all went wrong. So they introduced the new floor in Spa, and not Spa, sorry. Yes, it was Spa. But then they took it off because they had a bad Friday. Ran it again in Zandvoort and then abandoned it, basically, because they felt it had introduced instability into the car, and they felt that that was quite a negative step. And then they've introduced another iteration of the floor for last weekend in Austin, which again they felt was going to be a step forward, and again it's left them with more questions than answers. So I think you're absolutely right, Harry. There are still, as there were at the beginning of the season, there are still some very serious questions about we had Liam Lawson, who's got a replay. He's had a very near miss with the barriers on the exit of turn 3 there. Got a big oversteer moment coming out of that corner, caught it, but ended up running off the track in doing so, but just managed to not keep it out of the barriers. The big questions about whether Mercedes understand how to get the best out of their car under these regulations, which is an answer I think that we can say that McLaren and Red Bull have definitely got, mainly, although Red Bull themselves have had some difficulties this year, and Ferrari, still slightly early days with Ferrari's latest upgrade, but looks like with Ferrari's latest upgrade that they've got the answers too. Mercedes still scratching their heads, it looks like, from the outside.
Certainly are. Well, after that crash for George Russell, who has been taken in the medical car to the medical centre to be checked over, reported by Mercedes, the red flag is out while the clean-up operation begins, and the clock does continue to count down, though, of course, in FP2, so we're at 1 hour and 9 minutes and 38 seconds in what is an extended FP2 session to make way for Pirelli 2025 tyre testing, which of course gets a little bit truncated now. Also early problems for Max Verstappen and Red Bull, an possible engine issue that's been hanging over from FP1 seems to still be rearing its head in FP2. He came into the pits and was out of the car before the red flag was even flown, so a lot of concerned looks and a little bit of work. Actually, it's got a bit quiet now around Red Bull down at Verstappen's side of the garage.
Yeah, concerned looks, an empty car and not a lot going on around it. That's not a good look, is it?
That's you've hit the nail on the head. That was exactly what they were hoping, that it wasn't the worst case scenario, and the discussions around that car now look to point towards them thinking, well, actually our Elastoplast fix hasn't worked and it could be now what we feared it might be. So yeah, Max didn't look too enamoured either, did he? Had that sort of...
Well, this is, I suppose, music to Lando Norris and McLaren's ears, because as we said, this is going to be a crucial weekend once again for him if he's got any chance of keeping the title hopes alive moving forwards. And of course, McLaren have brought an upgrade this weekend, this long-awaited floor. Andrew, how big are we expecting this upgrade to be?
Well, they've been waiting on it a long time, and I think they've been waiting on it a long time for exactly the reasons that we've seen with Ferrari and Mercedes. They were worried that it wasn't, that they weren't convinced enough that it was definitely going to be a step forward. So what the problem that teams have with this generation of cars is that because you can't simulate, because the CFD computational fluid, basically cars are designed in two different ways, in the wind tunnel and with computational fluid dynamics. That's how they're tested. Wind tunnels can't simulate these ground effect cars because they're too limited, and the CFD can't simulate them because it's too complex. So what people are finding is that they'll put something on the car and then it doesn't behave on the track in the way that the wind tunnel or the CFD says. Or sometimes the track and CFD and the wind tunnel all give three different results. So McLaren were trying to avoid that, and they felt that they've got a good understanding of what the limitations of their development tools are, so they know when it looks like things they can't quite be confident enough that it's going to work. So that to bring it here is obviously, that's quite a big statement in itself, that they've had the confidence to bring it. What they're saying though is it's still at a relatively early stage of its development, but it still should give them a decent performance up step. Now, does that mean a 10th? Could they be looking
at that's big right now in current Formula One.
Exactly. So I think it's certainly not insignificant. Love a double negative, Harry. But we'll have to wait and see. But it's only on Norris's car, and this isn't helping this red flag. It's been going on for 10 plus minutes already, even with the extra half hour for the Pirelli tyre test, this is really eating into the team's development work.
It is, and certainly for somebody like Lando Norris, who missed out on FP1, he's certainly a little bit behind now when it comes to track time this weekend. So he's going to need all the action he can get to build up the confidence in that car with the new floor. In fact, here's him speaking a little earlier this weekend, following as well the antics of Austin.
I've been reviewed. I probably approached things in a pretty similar way, but slight tweaks here and there. Of course, didn't come out on top in the whole battle, so things always improve, and I think Max is probably the best, and I'll probably say quite confidently is the best in the world in this style of defense and attacking and those kind of things. So I'm going up against the best in the world, and therefore I got to be at his level. At the minute, I would say I'm not quite at the level I need to be at, and his level. Which is a shame to say, but it's probably the truth. And at the same time, it's an experience for me to learn and progress and try and do better. So it's still a good battle. I still really enjoyed everything that we did last weekend. It was still, a tough, exciting battle that we had on track. But of course, I want to be the one that comes out on top. I believe I rightfully was, but obviously the penalty in the end changed things around. So things will change a little bit. I'll, of course, change my approach in a slight manner, but I don't need to change everything.
Not quite at the level of Max Verstappen, Tom, for Lando Norris. I mean, Norris has become sort of quite self-critical of himself this season, very brutal. But when you look at Max Verstappen, yes, right now on paper, the last couple of years he's been dominant, and you would say certainly the best in the Formula One paddock. But that mentality for Lando Norris, is that a good thing for him? If perhaps he had more confidence, think, no, I can take it to Max Verstappen, I can be better, would we even be talking about the incident in Austin? Wouldn't Lando Norris have found a way to get past him without having to go off the track?
Well, I think that being super critical is really important. You need that baseline review and you need that honesty. What you're talking about is what you then do with that information. That can, for some people, be insurmountable. It can create mindfulness, it can be a worry. For other people, they're solution focused. They'll find a way to go and be the best that they can be and put those sort of wrongs right. I think for Lando, if you look back at the first corner, for example, obviously Max got up the inside of him there, and I think after the race he was actually spot on in his comments in the heat of the moment. He said, well, listen, if I'd have really covered off that inside line, I would have closed my angle off too much. I would have probably locked up, not been able to rotate the car. Max would have probably got the switch back. So actually, I think he was pretty fair there. Whatever he did up at turn one, I think Max would have probably got the better of him. But then, there's other elements. Monza, for example, down at the second chicane, where, was he robust enough with his teammate Oscar Piastri? That, of course, let Charles through with the Ferrari as well. So, there's elements of self-doubt there. But it's what he does with that, and if he's going to be ahead of Max at the end of the year, he's going to have to make sure that those sort of queries don't keep manifesting themselves.
Yeah, I think the wider point you're making is fair. The Monza situation, I think, is a really interesting one. I think I actually put that one on McLaren. I think they should have gone into that race saying, look, you're 1 and 2 on the grid. Let's not have any funny business on the first lap. Okay, no racing. Yeah, or maybe whoever gets to the first corner first, then you get to control the race from there. Because don't get me wrong, it was an absolutely brilliant move by Oscar Piastri around the outside at turn 2, but Norris was kind of hamstrung by the fact that McLaren have these racing rules, and one of those ones is don't crash with your teammate. So yes, he braked early and kind of gave Piastri the corner. Once Piastri had got on the outside of him, he would have been perfectly entitled to not brake early, and just because he was on the inside, and I think he could, if it was any other driver than his teammate, I think he would have braked later and forced Piastri basically off the track, because he would have been entitled to, because Piastri was only just alongside him, just a tiny bit ahead. He would have had every right just to brake as late as he wanted, but that could have meant either a crash or seriously compromising Piastri's race, and I think he didn't want to do that. And maybe maybe you're right, Tom, maybe that's him being too nice a guy. Would Ayrton Senna have done that to his teammate? No way. Would Max Verstappen let his teammate do that? No way. But McLaren have this internal harmony because both drivers are prepared to accept those internal racing rules, the papaya rules as they call them. So yes, you're right. On the other hand, it's a little bit harsh, I think, to lay that completely at Norris's door.
But would Norris, to take that Piastri incident, regardless of teammate, would he have done that? I think there's a larger argument to go, actually, Norris, if that was Leclerc going around the outside, or if it was Verstappen, is there an argument to go, actually, Norris is almost not aggressive enough sometimes with any driver in wheel-to-wheel combat, and is that holding him back?
Well, look, I think it's hard to make a definitive judgment on that. Okay, so let's take the first corner at Spain, for example. So he ended up in a Verstappen-Russell sandwich, and his argument was, if I'd try to go into the corner 3 wide with those two, and he was kind of like the slightly furthest back. Russell had the overspeed on the outside. Verstappen's coming up the inside. He tries to sit it out with the two of them. They're going to crash, aren't they? And he didn't want to crash, so maybe he should have done. Maybe he should have made the point, you could argue, but crashing a Formula 1 car is expensive as well. So that's that one. Then the other one is Austria. He did stand his ground in Austria, in the race at least, not the sprint race perhaps. He was not perhaps the same, but in the Grand Prix, some people criticised him for not giving Verstappen more room, because there was more curb to the left of Norris on the outside of turn 3 when Verstappen passed him on the inside and they crashed. Norris didn't give way, and he didn't give way because he didn't have to. There's no reason to, and I think he probably thought, no, stuff you, I'm not going to just move out your way because I know what you're doing. You're just trying to force me wide to get the corner, and it was Verstappen was on the inside again, like he always is when he's being challenged. He's a clever driver. Norris is on the outside, and Norris is thinking, well, do you know what? Why should I move any further for you? Why should I? That's actually that is him being tough.
Yep.
I can't think of any other direct incidents apart from the Piastri one.
I just wonder, that Max Verstappen has obviously created this reputation for himself for sort of, no holds bar racing, and I wonder if Norris has done that maybe sooner. If there'd been more Austria-like races, then people wouldn't be willing to almost take advantage of sometimes the wheel-to-wheel racing that Norris has experienced most recently.
Is it people, or is it just Verstappen, really?
That's a very good point.
It's the Verstappen move we're really discussing in Austin, aren't we? And I think it's because it's Verstappen that it's become such a talking point with the drivers. This is Verstappen's modus operandi. He goes on the inside, he throws the car at the inside, takes both cars off the track, keeps the position. It seems from this weekend, yesterday, the media day, that most of the drivers think that's wrong and something needs to be done about it.
Yeah, and going back to that point, it's just, we don't want to be in a position here where we're saying to Lando, you need to be more like Max. The reality of the situation is Lando Norris needs to be Lando Norris. He can't run that risk of being a second-rate version of someone else, because then it really does start to unravel. So he's got to find a way of doing it the Lando Norris way and making sure that he stays true to himself. And I think he was saying that in his comments, where he's not actually looking to change too much.
Yeah, I think most drivers, they have a way that they feel is right to go racing, and they don't, they have most drivers have an inherent sense of fairness about them, and whether it be Hamilton or Alonso or Norris now, they want to go racing in a way that they feel is right. Same with Charles Leclerc. To go back to the 2019 incident in Austria, he felt that Verstappen should have been penalised for that incident. Verstappen won the race as a result of it. He wasn't penalised. And Leclerc was really angry at the time. And he turned up in Silverstone 4 days later, and they ended up having an absolute stonking battle between the two of them, because basically Leclerc realised, well, I'm allowed to race like Max Verstappen, so I'm going to race like Max Verstappen to Max Verstappen and see how he likes it. And what happened was that not only did Leclerc stick it right to Verstappen, and it produced half a Grand Prix of some of the most brilliant racing I've ever seen. He won that battle for a long time, and then the strategies came in with the pit stops, and in the end Verstappen ended up ahead, but Leclerc kept the position in what was probably a slower car. So the other drivers can change if they want to, but they often really don't feel comfortable with it. They feel that there's a certain level of racing ethics that they should stick to. But then you get these drivers who come along every now and again, once in a generation maybe, or maybe it skips a generation, who they just through force of personality, force of nature, change the game. Ayrton Senna was the first one. Michael Schumacher was the next. A lot of what Michael Schumacher got up to was not, at the time was frowned upon. Remember David Coulthard giving him the finger at Magny-Cours around the hairpin. And now, although the drivers are much more polite with each other, David Coulthard and Michael Schumacher really didn't like each other very much. The drivers now, it's quite interesting seeing how the generations have shifted. They're all quite matey, off the track, so they don't like to criticise Verstappen publicly. And also that part of the reason for that is because they respect him so much, because they see how good he is. But in their polite way, as they've all become such polite young men in Formula One, these Grand Prix drivers these days, they were pretty much all saying yesterday, that's not on.
Do we want polite young men, or do we want a bit of... I don't have to go back that far to sort of Hamilton-Rosberg. That was far from polite at times.
Even Vettel, Vettel, we saw shades of it. We do talk about Max Verstappen because we see a lot of him. It's at the front of the grid. But, playing devil's advocate, Kevin Magnussen, Esteban Ocon, not to unfairly pick out one or two, but, those are two drivers that are very well known for being very robust. I don't think you're going to find many days of the week where you're passing Kevin Magnussen around the outside, for example.
Well, the session is just about to get underway as well, as they're all lining up at the end of the pit lane waiting for the red light. Before they get onto the track, I'll tell you what, let's hear from a very polite young man, Max Verstappen.
So Max, quite a battle with Lando last time out in Austin. Just wondering how you reflect on what happened now and all the talk about it afterwards.
Same as what I said before, and that's it for me, to be honest.
And what about the championship situation from here?
Yeah, Austin for me was a positive weekend. Sunday was not so good, but that's something that we are analysing why that happened. But overall, I felt like at least I was a bit more in the fight. The last few races I've always just not been able to do anything, and the car was definitely more competitive. So I hope that we can, from now onwards at least be in that fight. To be able to, just do something from our side, to try and win a race.
Max Verstappen there speaking just ahead of practice earlier. Green flag now back out, 53 minutes and 20 seconds remain of FP2.
So just to finish the point on the racing rules for now, at least, I dare say we may come back to it later, but just for now, what we didn't hear from that was the very next interview. That was the sort of Formula One TV interview yesterday. The very next interview Verstappen did, he was asked about whether the rules needed clarifying on the situation with Norris, and he started off by saying, reiterating this line about you can't overtake off the track. Then he said, well, what about what the other drivers are saying, about whether this should be allowed or not? And he said, basically admitted what he does. He said, it's how the rules are written. I don't make the rules. I just follow the rules as much as I can. I implement the rules and play with them. And there you are. There's the admission that he knows what he's doing with those incidents.
And you know what? Fair play.
Absolutely, yeah.
Unless this now sparks the change of the rules, and then he continues to do what he's doing, then there's an issue because he's going against the rules. But at the moment, he followed what the guidelines are set out to be for wheel-to-wheel racing in that scenario, and that resulted in the 5-second time penalty for Lando Norris. I dare say we will keep talking about this as it rolls on, and well, if we get any repeat incidents in Sunday's Grand Prix. But we are now back underway. Then a reminder: this was an extended session. We are now 51 minutes and 49 seconds remaining, extended for Pirelli tyre testing. So pretty much everybody out there on test development tyres from Pirelli as they try and hone in on some of their developments for their 2025 tyres.
And what's unfortunate about that red flag is I was trying to stay on top of who was on what tyre. It's all gone out the window now. And now I can't, because it's like, which tyres are they on now? Are these new? Are these old? Because on the timing screens it just says T for test. So we're going to have to wait until they put the proper race tyres on before we can tell anybody anything useful about what's going on out on track.
I was just about to throw to to Harry to explain which car's on which strategy. Why we're struggling...
That is the definition of throwing someone under a bus, that is.
Yeah. Why we're struggling is because the test tyre has no marking. And so, you know, we only have what we've got on the timing screen, which is a test tyre. We don't know if it's the Optimum or the base tyre. We don't really know if they're on the performance run or the long run. We'll be able to settle into that now. But also, question mark around the drivers that sat out FP1 and will, you know, when will they switch on to their strategy? They'll also get an extra set of medium compound tyres, won't they, for the rest of the practice?
Yeah, I don't think they're going to get a chance to run those now, though, or they're going to run out of time. I mean, basically, we've got less than a full session left, and yet they're going to want to do, you would think, a full session. So I wonder whether the teams are going to take these Pirelli, because the Pirelli tyres probably haven't changed that much. They'll probably take these runs now on the test tyres as their sort of, you know, if you think about what a practice session normally is, it's you do a run on the medium or the hard tyre to do a sort of it's a setup run basically, then you go into your qualifying simulation run, then you go into race simulation. So I'm imagining they'll use these Pirelli test tyres as a kind of quasi, you know, medium hard tyre run and then move on to their normal programme. I don't know that's what's going to happen because they don't normally tell you what they're going to do ahead of time, but I suspect that will be. But they've got less than a full session or less than a normal full session to do that in.
That's the sound of Lewis Hamilton coming across the line to go 8th fastest in the sole remaining Mercedes. No George Russell. He was the reason for the rather lengthy red flag in the end for Russell, finding the barriers between turns 7, 8 and 9. He was out of the car, made his way back to the medical centre for checks. It's Carlos Sainz who is currently fastest with a 1:17.699, just over a tenth and a half. Clear of Oscar Piastri. Yuki Tsunoda is 3rd, Magnussen is 4th, and Sergio Perez has just popped himself up into 5th. Now, we've spoken a lot about Perez's teammate, naturally Max Verstappen, but Sergio Perez, well, home soil for the Mexican. It's a big weekend in that respect. The amount of Sergio Perez fans here is literally in the almost probably hundreds and thousands. That's how many will pack out across the weekend here for the Mexico City Grand Prix. But 3 top 5 starts in the last 13 Grand Prix. He's even said that he knows he's had a terrible season, Tom. And I feel like the pressure is always on for Perez, but it ramped up once again because Liam Lawson, who has catapulted in to replace Daniel Ricciardo for the rest of the year at the RB team, had such a brilliant result last week in Austin.
Yeah, it's always difficult looking from the outside in, knowing what bits are on which car and where Sergio is, various different rumours. He was talking actually in the presser, wasn't he, about not, you know, Max did have different bits on his car for Austin and they were looking at the delta. There was a delta loss between the two cars, certainly for last weekend.
Yeah, there was. It wasn't as big as the gap between them on track, though. Yes.
He'd like to think it was.
Yeah, he would, yeah. Well, I think even Perez probably wouldn't claim that. But, yeah, look, he is... We all know he's under pressure. Basically, Liam Lawson's last 6 races of the year, they're effectively an audition, or they could be an audition for whether he is in the Red Bull next year. If he, you know, is consistently quicker than Yuki Tsunoda, I think he'll be in the Red Bull next year. I think it's pretty simple. Here's Verstappen's radio again.
Okay, Max, recharge on, please. We've got the same problem, so box.
So they've got him out again from that engine problem earlier, and obviously they still haven't cured it because he's being called back in again. This is not looking good for Verstappen's second practice session.
No, it's really not, is it? So he's out on track at the moment, but called back into pit.
I've just been told by the producer as well that apparently James Vowles, the Williams team principal, has been saying on Sky that it's looking tough to get Albon out at all in this session.
Yeah, he had a big crash in free practice 1, driver okay, car not so. And I wonder if Alex Albon and a couple of those midfield drivers have a bit of a problem in the shape of Franco Colapinto coming at them. The Argentine who has come in to replace Logan Sargent for the rest of the year. He will not be a Williams driver next year. That seat is promised to Carlos Sainz. But there is a Sauber seat up for grabs. And if there is a bit of a shuffling at RB, well, suddenly there could well be a seat available there, even though he's not within the Red Bull programme. could be an option?
I think it's not impossible at all that you could get a scenario where, assuming Lawson does, if Lawson continues in the vein of Austin, I think he'll be in the Red Bull next year. That would be my guess. And then there's a seat open at RB. Does Perez get it? Probably not. In which case, Christian Horner's already been talking about how impressive Colapinto's been. I think I can definitely see him being drafted into the Red Bull program. So he won't get the Williams because Sainz and Albon are on at least 2-year contracts, 2 years more, so 25 and 26. So they're safe, and so Sauber are obviously looking for somebody. Valtteri Bottas was saying yesterday that he's basically agreed the deal with Sauber in terms of the numbers that it would be, but he's just waiting to hear whether he actually gets the deal. So the ball's in the team's court, basically.
Well, the team could have done that, I suppose, with a number of different drivers, right? There was even rumour of Valtteri Bottas maybe going back to Mercedes as a reserve.
That's the point I'm making. It's not saying
he's got to have his options.
He's just saying, I know what the deal at Sauber would be if I get it, but I don't know whether I'm going to get it. Yeah.
So, I mean, we could well be saying goodbye, Tom, to some pretty, veteran drivers, Valtteri Bottas and Sergio Perez. He has come out and said, I've turned down offers to go to other teams this year. But if he's turned those down and he does get biffed off at the end of the season by Red Bull, is that Perez's Formula One career over?
Do you know what? I think I'm always quite balanced on this because I'm really excited to see young talent coming through, but we've got to make sure that we've got an element of sustainability in the sport, so young drivers can have a career and if they're performing properly at the highest level, then they're not just overlooked for the next. For the next young driver coming through from Formula 2. And sometimes, over the years that can provide a bit of a bottleneck because we had a handful of years ago an influx of Formula 2 drivers and junior drivers and now that, they occupy some of the seats, although for next year we're going to have 1 or 2 drivers making the progression. You've seen Colapinto in now, Liam Lawson, so to speak, but they've got to have some stability, if you like, a chance to earn their money and earn their keep at the top level. And I think Perez, for me now, has had that window. I don't think he's shown enough in that Red Bull to warrant staying in Formula One, and I know that's brutally harsh, but I think he's had a wonderful innings so far.
It's not brutally harsh. It's perfectly fair.
It's been around since 2011. He's had a longer Formula One career than many would wish for.
He's had a very decent, very lucrative career for a driver who is okay at a Formula One level. There's the world-class A-grade talents in Formula One, and then there's people below that. And then there's people below that, and Perez is somewhere in that area below the world-class level of talent.
If we look at Carlos Sainz, for example, where the rub of the green hasn't gone his way in terms of keeping that seat at Ferrari, and he'll go to Williams, and we'll wait to see what Williams do. But I know what you're saying there, Andrew. I would actually rate someone like Carlos Sainz as a driver that maybe has more credential than Sergio Perez.
Well, let's hear from Sergio Perez, shall we? He's been chatting ahead of practice earlier today.
Austin wasn't a good weekend for us. We did lack some of the upgrade. We basically thought that the new flow wasn't as big as it was. It turned out to be in the end with Max. We had a bit of that, and we just didn't get a good weekend. It wasn't a good weekend where I built a lot of confidence. But Mexico is different. It's a different game. It's a different track. So let's see. We got some changes here. So let's see. Hopefully we can be in the mix for the win.
And historically, Red Bull Racing has done very well here. Does that give you some confidence?
Yeah, definitely. I think we've had good races in the past. We've always been competitive. Every year I've been here with Red Bull, we've always fight for the win, for the podium. So I really hope that we can be at that level this weekend.
two emotional podiums here for Sergio Perez. Third place in 2021 and 2022, but of course it was lap 1, turn 1 last year where it all went awry for Sergio Perez at his home Grand Prix, and what felt like a bit of a chancer move round the outside found Charles Leclerc, and that was Perez's day done. He'll be hoping for a much longer Grand Prix on Sunday, but there is certainly still a little bit of shuffling to be done in this driver market. 41 minutes to go, by the way. Sainz is still fastest ahead of Piastri, Tsunoda. Leclerc is on a lap now. Magnussen's 5th ahead of Hamilton, Bottas, Perez, Norris and Lawson. The top 10 ahead of Hulkenberg, Ocon, Stroll, Colapinto. Alonso is 15th ahead of Gasly. Joe Russell is 18th and out of this session, having crashed into the barriers early doors. Verstappen with engine issues confined to the garage, and Alex Albon didn't make it out at the start of FP2 after his crash in FP1. It's been a bit of a messy Friday so far in Mexico City.
It has, and I'm going to make a prediction now that they're going to finish these Pirelli tyre runs, test runs I should say, and then all we're going to get on the standard tyres are the quali sims and then the race sims, because we've only got 40 minutes left. Leclerc has just gone 4th on his run, which was anyway something on the
take your best guess. Leclerc has just gone 4th, just under 0.2 of a second back from Carlos Sainz's fastest time. This is the sound of Lando Norris making his way through the final corner, slightly banked at the Peraltada, takes you on to that long start finish straight, 1.2 kilometre straight. The first of the DRS dosage comes your way, slightly shortened DRS zone for this year. He's got a Sauber to his right hand side. It's Zhou Guanyu, and he manages to slam onto the brakes, get it into the right-hander, quickly into the left, take a little bit of curve, out through the right-hander again of turn 3, and then you're on to the next DRS straight down towards turn 4 and 5, where we've seen some brilliant moves there. I was watching, and as part of my homework this weekend, that brilliant battle from a few years ago with Verstappen, Vettel in the Ferrari and Ricciardo in the other Red Bull, and effectively Verstappen backing up Vettel into Ricciardo in that corner. It really promotes, you can get some decent racing around this track, Tom.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And actually, you know, I said in FP1, overtaking is hard around here, but it's possible. You have to work hard to get it done. And the other element is it's easy to make a mistake around here. You know, I've talked about your brake temperature, cooling, that kind of thing. We know that there's a big track evolution. We know that it's going to be dusty and dirty offline, even on race day. So if you do make a mistake and you do run wide, you run the risk of being railroaded by the cars behind. I'm just looking at the timing screens. I know it's early days, and I know I said this in pre-practice 1 as well, but look at the RBs, both cars in the top 10 at the moment. Yuki Tsunoda, 3rd quickest. I know it counts for nothing, but what I'm trying to say is they've obviously rolled off the truck in a semi-decent state, those RBs.
Well, you know what, they were good here last year as well. Ricciardo, when he returned into, as it was, the AlphaTauri, had his best run here in Mexico, and Tsunoda should have been up there in the points with him had he not had a bit of a ding-dong with Oscar Piastri down at turn 1 and his frustrations to get up the pack. So they go well here.
Can I just raise another contentious point we haven't talked about?
Of course. That's
Daniel Ricciardo, his send-off. Are we over that yet? Because actually, you know, I think he deserved, and you know, you see in other sports, the Guard of Honor, people, you know, with their kids, you know, I think he deserved something a little bit better than what he got.
It was a bit pathetic, wasn't it? I wasn't impressed by the way they handled that. You know, they basically forced Ricciardo to lie. You know, they told him before the weekend that he was out and he couldn't, but he wasn't allowed to say.
But
why not?
Yeah.
Exactly. Why not? And the whole paddock knew. You know, it was ridiculous, really. Even at the end, they were still keeping the charade up. You know, if we thought it might be his last race, so we let him go for fastest lap. You know, I mean, come on. I really don't see what they gained by not doing it, and I think that obviously that Ricciardo obviously found it very emotional weekend. I'm sure he would have found it emotional anyway, but the fact that he had to like go through public subterfuge for 4 days can't have helped. and he deserved better, I think.
He did. I think even the team principal, Lauren Mekies, alluded to the fact that they didn't do it. They could have handled that way better, and it is a shame. And Ricciardo finished 4th here last year when he had his comeback after his broken wrist from the Netherlands. So the RB team, not AlphaTauri last year, do run well here. Tsunoda currently up in 3rd. There is rumours perhaps Red Bull are dangling a carrot in front of Yuki Tsunoda of a Red Bull test at the end of the year.
No longer rumours. Christian Horner said in the press conference between the first and second practice sessions that he will drive the car in the Abu Dhabi post-season test. He said it's been arranged for a while.
Okay, now look, we have this conversation almost every weekend, Andrew, that Tsunoda is just completely overlooked by Red Bull. It's Lawson who is the tip to go there, and obviously Red Bull can see all the numbers, they can see all the data, but to have his first ever proper Red Bull test at this stage in his Formula One career, even that seems like a bit of a delay for no good reason.
It's just confirmation of how they regard him, isn't it? You know.
But if they don't regard him, why keep him? Because of Honda.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how many times we had this conversation.
I know, but that just seems to me like I don't know. You know,
he's getting the test because of Honda.
I just think, but they're leaving Honda. They're getting rid of Honda, and they're going to do Red Bull powertrains with backed by Ford. So as soon as that happens, Tsunoda's done. He's dropped straight away.
I don't know, but I would imagine so. I mean, look. What can I tell you?
I just think, are Honda giving some sort of... Okay, there's obviously some sort of deal being done, but I don't understand why there is a deal when Red Bull aren't really the team that need a kind of, you know, a cheap deal from Honda to take a driver when they have their own Red Bull driver pool.
Well, all works engine partnerships come with financial assistance to the team. That's just the way it is. And obviously, Honda have agreed with Red Bull a deal whereby they get their chosen driver to be in the second seat of the RB.
And they've had a long history of doing that.
Yeah, so I took right back to Satoru Nakajima in the Lotus in the 80s. In fact, Williams lost the Honda engine actually in the 80s after winning the World Championship with it in the Constructors in 86 and then the Drivers and the Constructors in 87 because they wouldn't take a Japanese driver. That was when Honda went to McLaren, when Senna went to McLaren at the same time. And the Honda engines moved from Williams to Lotus at the end of 87 because of exactly that reason, because Frank Williams refused to have Satoru Nakajima in his car.
Satoru Nakajima, who actually had a big crash here back in 1987.
Good memory.
And Murray Walker with one of his best lines, I think, "No wheel on my wagon," which I think is absolutely sensational to come up with that in the moment.
The big crash I remember from Mexico from the 90s, sort of late 80s, early 90s period was for Senna when he went upside down into the gravel at Peraltada. Obviously, only half of the Peraltada corner survives these days, sadly.
Didn't Mansell have a big crash there as well?
Mansell did the famous overtake around the outside of Gerhard Berger.
Yeah, that was it.
In the same race that, in fact, we were talking about this on the podcast yesterday, radio show, in the same race that Alain Prost won from 13th on the grid, arguably his greatest ever drive.
Just to deviate, while we are still on the wider Red Bull angle, we just saw a replay flash up of the entire floor is now off the underside of Verstappen's car.
Something is burning, but I don't think it comes from my car.
Okay.
It smells the brake pads.
Okay, mate, understood. We'll let you know if we need any action.
That's Esteban Ocon saying something is burning, that he doesn't think it's coming from his car. His teammate, earlier in FP1 was saying something smells like cooking from the inside of his Alpine. So we'll see what's going on there. But an entire floor of Max Verstappen's car has been removed and taken out of the garage, giving them more access to the underside of that car. So these problems are big for Red Bull and Max Verstappen right now.
Well, I don't know about you two, but I'm bored of Pirelli tyre testing now. I want proper tyres, proper practice now, please. Can we have Formula 1 teams?
Do they not know we have long run corner to get to?
Well, I don't know whether we do, Harry. Long run corners receding into the distance.
We need a backup feature. Producer Joe, quickly, get thinking. Backup feature. Where's Gabriel Bortoletto when you need him?
On tear-offs.
How good was he?
You know
he
what?
was brilliant.
Brilliant. A great speaker. And you know what? For a guy that is... there's a bit of pressure on him. You know, I mean, we talk about pressure all the time. Of course, there's pressure on every single driver. But, you know, leading the Formula 2 Championship, here's Joe.
My front brakes are burning last sector, mate. They're burning.
Well, that solves the case of who has the burning front brakes. It's Zhou Guanyu, who could find himself out of that seat come the end of the year and replaced by Gabriel Bortoleto. He is being linked with the Sauber-C, his McLaren development driver, very closely backed with them and managed by Fernando Alonso. But for a man who has got a Formula 2 championship to seal off, I thought he was very, very cool to have on the show with us. He's welcome back anytime.
Yeah, they say never meet your heroes, and
is Gabriel Bortoleto your hero, Tom?
No, I was talking about him meeting Harry.
I was going to say, made it sound like he was your hero.
He said he was nervous meeting Harry.
He was. I do induce that in some. But that will be an interesting scenario to see what Bortoleto's future beckons. He's got 4.5 points in his favour in the F2 Championship, ahead of Isaac Hadjar, whose chances at being on the grid have also slightly increased. He's part of that Red Bull Junior programme, but of course we have got that Franco Colapinto situation too. And you know what, also rumours sparking this weekend around Oscar Piastri possibly being linked with a Red Bull seat. I think he has squashed that publicly, but never say never.
No, and on Red Bull, the subject of Red Bull, Verstappen is out of the rest of the session while they investigate this issue. Here's Joe's radio.
My engine is cutting, guys. I don't know if you guys don't see it, but I'm feeling the cutting.
Can I make an observation again?
We're looking into this.
Yeah, whatever, it's Joe. This is what I was going to say. Right, there's a Pirelli tyre test going on, and F1 are giving us Esteban Ocon's smelly brakes and Joe's engine problems. Can't we have some radio from someone important?
BBC's F1 correspondent Andrew Benson, alongside myself, Harry Benjamin, and former racer and broadcaster Tom Gaymore.
Can I just finish the Yuki Tsunoda discussion?
Oh yeah, we didn't actually do that, did we?
Do you know what? There's elements of when you watch Yuki, and you know, there's been one or two quick teammates that have gone up against him, and you know, he's been there and thereabouts, and then you see shades of really things starting to progress in that speed, and then you know, things like what happened at Austin and other things, and then he goes missing, and it's just feast or famine with Yuki. But he's definitely better than just somebody that's there because of, you know, political reasons. But it's frustrating to watch him at times.
I mean, look, Red Bull, the thing is, Red Bull, he's a Red Bull driver, and he's been driving for Red Bull for a number of years now. And Red Bull, they don't just want someone who can be quick every now and again. They need you know, this is Max Verstappen's teammate you're talking about. They've got to be able to handle the pressure. They've got to be able to give sensible feedback. They've got to be consistent. I mean, okay, Perez hasn't been very quick this year, but at least he's generally consistent. I'm sure his feedback's pretty decent as well. You know, you can't have someone shouting at the radio if you're at Red Bull. They see him on the simulator. They've seen him against Ricciardo. They've seen him against Lawson. Who else has been in the car alongside him? Gasly quite comfortably beat him, let's be honest, and Gasly got absolutely trounced by Verstappen. So that will, I mean, I think there was no coming back from that really for Tsunoda. Once Gasly thrashed him when he first came into Formula One, and they don't rate Gasly obviously because they kicked him out after half a season. Even though he went on to win a race for them in AlphaTauri in Monza through... we've got a bit of a dice going on here between... Is it Lance Stroll and Lando Norris?
It's Alonso.
Oh, it's Alonso.
Who is very much lapping up every minute of his 400th
the helmet
Grand Prix entry.
Has he got a...
He's got a special helmet celebrating 400 Grand Prix and having a right ding-dong with Norris. You know, there's a quiz on the BBC Sport website.
I'm glad you say that, Harry, because I was going to suggest it. I was going to promote it myself.
Have you done it?
I have, yes.
100%?
Actually, the first time I got one question wrong.
No! Yeah. What one was it?
The one about how many times he's won from pole position.
Oh, I got that one wrong as well.
Yeah.
And the one about in one of his championship years, did he score points in every single race?
Yeah.
I got that wrong. I only got 85%.
I got all of them except that one. Yeah. Actually, because kicking myself afterwards.
I thought you would be. Well, if you think you could beat Andrew Benson or myself on the Fernando Alonso quiz, head to the BBC Sport website and check that one out. Now, if we're being pedantic, it's not actually his 400th Grand Prix. Because
correct.
2001 Belgium, 2005 US, and Russia 2017.
He didn't take part in the race.
But still the weekend as a whole. So I think everyone's sort of accepting that, yeah, I mean, he's still rocked up to these places 400 times more than any. So that is if you step back, that's a pretty amazing feat.
So look, I said this. I did a podcast for someone else
I watched
a couple
it the
of
other
weeks
day.
ago to promote the book that I probably shouldn't be talking about, but I am doing.
That's right. It's all right. It's
anyway, I've said this a couple of times already this year. I think for me, the thing at the moment about Fernando Alonso, and I was talking to Alberto Fernandez, his manager, about this in Austin, because actually I was talking to Alberto about the interview that I'm expecting to get with Fernando in Las Vegas, and what I might sort of things I might ask him about. But the thing for me is that whenever you ask him about longevity, age, he's 43 years old. And he still appears to be driving every bit as good as he ever has. He just brushes it off, the cars aren't that physical and blah, blah, blah. But it's not just about the physicality of it. It's about the commitment, the desire, the want to get up every morning and drive a car again for 10th place on the grid or whatever. And I think, for me, the thing that's extraordinary about him is that he doesn't realise he's extraordinary, or he doesn't realise what he's doing is extraordinary. And he's going to be in Formula One at least until he's 45 years old. It's absolutely incredible, really.
The thing I found also amazing was that I listened to a podcast that he did recently with Tom Clarkson. I'm sure we all know which one. And I had no idea that he was saying about, did he expect to have such a long career? And when he signed for McLaren the first time round, saying that he thought that would be his last contract and that he would retire at the end of 2009. And yet here we are. Okay, he's had a bit of a break here and there. But the possibility of Fernando Alonso of sitting out that contract and then calling it quits, it's night and day to the man we have before us now.
But I think this is the point. He just loves being a racing driver when he's not driving a Formula. It's a bit like Max Verstappen like that, actually. And I think it's not a surprise that those two have this mutual respect. I mean, it's not just obviously they both admire each other's ability, but I think they recognise themselves as kindred spirits. When Max Verstappen's not racing a Formula 1 car, he's going off with his dad to Portimao or Estoril or somewhere and driving or Mugello or whatever, driving GT3 cars. In fact, I was talking to Jos Verstappen on the phone a couple of weeks ago, and that's where he was. He was with Max doing some tests in GT3 cars. And Alonso's the same. If he's not in an F1 car, he's driving a kart at his track in Oviedo. By the way, his museum is really interesting. Went there when I interviewed him in 2021, was it, when he was with Alpine? But anyway, he just loves it. He just loves it.
And let's not forget, his Indy 500 exploits. That's oval racing that not everyone fancies, especially at his age as you get older, because the risk versus reward around an oval incredibly quick and very dangerous.
But also, I think he loves racing is the pivotal word here. It's not just Formula 1, as you say, it's IndyCar, but also, doing the Dakar Rally, such different types of racing. The categories are so versatile. The man can go in anything and pretty much win. Of course, Le Mans endurance style, stick him in anything and he'd be good. I'd love to see what he'd be like on a bike.
Yeah, and the thing about the Dakar was he had a couple of accidents, which sort of knocked him out of overall contention, but he had some stages where he was really properly quick, and so he basically can get in anything and drive it really. It's not a surprise, is it? It's Fernando Alonso, but he can get in anything, drive it quickly. The Le Mans win, the first Le Mans win with Toyota, I think is a bit underestimated by people, because people look at it as it was just two Toyotas racing against each other. But he did a stint in the middle of the night. He did a quadruple stint in which he made up 2 minutes on the other car, the other identical car, 2 minutes in a quadruple stint.
Huge.
Basically, it won the race for them, that car.
And they say that's where the heroes are made, overnight at Le Mans. Those special.
Will we see anybody get to 400s like Alonso?
Well, Hamilton's probably going to do it, isn't he? That's Hamilton on now, because he's got at least a 2-year Ferrari contract.
He's on 351 starts, so he could probably do it. But in terms, I suppose, of the current, younger generation crop,
Well, I think the thing is, two things have got to happen. You've got to have the desire to do it yourself, and you have to have teams desiring to have you. So George Russell was saying yesterday, he was asked, do you think you're going to get to 400? He's like, oh yeah, why not? I look at Lewis and Fernando as inspiration. I'm 26, why can't I go on for another 15 years? Well, he could. And he is brilliant, don't get me wrong, George Russell, but is he as brilliant as Lewis Hamilton and Fernando Alonso, and can he keep the commitment going that level? Will he want to carry on that long? Sometimes Formula One leaves you behind. You don't get a choice. And I think the extraordinary thing about Alonso, again, it's not extraordinary because he's still producing the goods at age 43, but is that he's kept that ability to deliver for so long, which, let's not forget, even Michael Schumacher didn't.
And when you look at Lewis Hamilton, he's done it without a break. Fernando did have that break to control, alt, delete, recharge the batteries, get that sort of new lens in terms of what he wanted to do, that fresh impetus. Lewis has done it at the top, at McLaren, at Mercedes, under immense pressure, fighting for podiums and victories all the way through, really. You could say, actually, if Lewis does get there, that is the more sensational achievement. They're both incredible. Max Verstappen, on the other hand, kind of alluded to the fact that he would, that's not something that interests him, that he wouldn't be doing that.
Well, let's see. Quite often, a bit like with Alonso, not that Alonso said it publicly, but a bit like Alonso, as Harry was saying in the F1 podcast that was released this week, that he thought in 2007 he thought he was going to quit at the end of 2009, and here he still is in 2024. Quite often people think, in Verstappen's case, for example, a lot of the time they think, I might not fancy this for that much longer, but then when they get to the decision point, if you're going to be driving racing cars, why wouldn't you be A, driving the best possible racing cars you can, for B, the most possible money that you can? Verstappen's earning 100 million a year at the moment when you add in his salary from Red Bull and his endorsements, that sort of region. Obviously, when you've earned 100 million for 4 or 5 years, then you don't need any more hundreds of millions, do you? But it doesn't stop you wanting it,
No, it is a really amazing achievement from Fernando Alonso. He has never started or finished, though, in the top 8 here, so that'll be something he can hope to try and break the duck of. We'll see how the Aston Martin Vez actually retired here last year. Car's still out on track. We're still really in the thick of Pirelli tyre testing. We don't really know what tyres anybody are on, especially after the red flag caused by George Russell. We know there is some back-to-back testing going on with a mixture of performance and long runs. I would put a guess out there that we're into more of the long run pace now. It's 19 minutes and 22, 21, 20 seconds remain. Sainz tops the session, Piastri second, Tsunoda third, Leclerc fourth, Magnussen the top 5.
You don't need to guess, Harry. It's there on your Pirelli crib sheet. Have you not been looking at it?
We don't know when. We don't know, exactly what run they're on.
It says long run on runs 3 and 4.
Oh, I see, 3 and 4. Okay, so they definitely are on the long run.
We do, Harry.
Well, Tom, tell me more about the long run, Tom.
It's longer than the short run.
Well,
do you know what? Piastri, we haven't seen much of Piastri. He's up there in second place. I know times aren't really representative because we don't know who's doing what. But, in terms of a balance, Oscar Piastri really struggled in that first free practice session, it's fair to say. Just didn't feel like the car was underneath him. Whether or not that's track evolution or whether or not they've made some changes in between the session, we just don't know. But the fact that we haven't seen much of him and he's up there is a better sign for Oscar Piastri in that McLaren car. Teammate Lando Norris down in 9th place at the moment. First outing on track for Lando, having sat out free practice 1. Isn't it funny, we've had Lando sit out free practice 1, we've essentially had Max Verstappen sit out the whole of free practice 2.
It's all even.
It's balanced itself out nicely.
Well, that will be a really intriguing point going forward into FP3 tomorrow and qualifying. Verstappen, no time on the board, in the pits, out of the car, done and dusted for that session. Perez looks like he is about to be sent out again on the other side of the garage.
We need some jeopardy in this session, don't we? And I'm going to create some now.
Go on.
Most drivers, not all, but most drivers are on their 4th test run, and they're only doing 4 test runs. Are we going to get any running on normal tyres before the end of the session?
I don't
There's
think we
the jeopardy.
I don't think we are. Except for... Well, I tell you what, the drivers who didn't take part in FP1 are allowed to do that in the last half an hour. So theoretically, they could...
Everyone's allowed to if you get to it. What was confusing for me...
They have to do 60 minutes, don't they?
Fairly.
Yeah.
Well, nobody, we can tell you categorically, is on the current tyres at the moment. They're all still on those test tyres in that long run phase with just over 15 minutes remaining. I'll tell you what, just to sit back from what's happening on the track a moment, something, Andrew, you just said a moment ago while talking about Fernando Alonso piqued my interest about his Le Mans win and that kind of being underestimated. And it just made me think about the other 24-hour Le Mans winner on the grid in Nico Hülkenberg. Is that a man we've perhaps underestimated over the course of his career? The man who is now getting a proper second flourish, really, at a Formula One career.
I don't think so. I mean, you can go back through his career, and he's a very good driver, Nico Hülkenberg, but he's one of those ones who's in the sort of second or third division in Formula One. He's had plenty of opportunities. He was reasonably closely matched with Perez when they were teammates at Force India. But it was Perez who got the podiums for that team, not Hülkenberg. And every time he's got into a position where he might have won a race or looked like he might get a podium, he's basically stuffed it up. You know, he crashed with Hamilton in Brazil in 2012. He hit the inside wall at Baku in the Renault one year. I can't remember what year that was.
Hockenheim one year as well.
Hockenheim in the Renault. In fact, that was what gave Cyril Abiteboul the final. Wasn't a very rational decision from Abiteboul. He basically sort of said it looks like fate's never going to allow Nico Hülkenberg to get a podium. Might not have been wrong, by the way, but not rational. So, you know, when he was at Renault, he got beaten by Daniel Ricciardo. He's been quicker than Kevin Magnussen, but you know, he's a good, solid driver. But I think, and to widen that question out a bit, I think this is one of the questions about Audi. You know, they've signed Hülkenberg basically because he's the only German driver available, because they needed a German driver. Needing a driver from a certain nationality is not really the way to go about being competitive in Formula One in the 21st century. Anyway, so I think my view is the answer is no. Nico Hülkenberg's had a very decent Formula One career, but has he ever given any suggestion that he's likely to, you know, be any kind of comparison for the Hamiltons, Alonsos, Verstappens and so on of this world? No.
And I think people underestimate how big a step it is from that sort of Division 2 driver to that Division 1, to that top 1%, where every single lap is scrutinised, where we've seen it with Pierre Gasly, for example. You know, he really does shine in that lower tier when the pressure's not necessarily on him, when he can find time to settle in and build his weekend. But actually, when he was in against one of the very best in Max Verstappen, where every single lap was scrutinised, pressure built and mistakes happened, he didn't really flourish in that space. And I think the gulf is actually quite big between the two.
Yeah, and when very good drivers come up against those sorts of caliber drivers, they get found out very quickly, and if you're unfortunate enough to be someone who comes up against them early, it can end your career. Stoffel Vandoorne would be a classic example of that. You know, he had a fantastic junior career. He's Formula E world champion with Mercedes a couple of years ago. You know, I think if Stoffel Vandoorne had come into Formula One against someone else of that sort of second rank category of drivers, he probably could have been in it for 10 years, but he didn't. He came in against Fernando Alonso and he got absolutely thrashed.
He could have had the Magnussen career.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because they were both coming up the ranks as McLaren juniors, weren't they, back in the day? And you have to give it to K-Mag. He's had a pretty decent run as well in Formula One. Looks like he'll be out of the championship come the end of the year when Haas go for an all-new lineup, really, with Esteban Ocon and Oliver Behrman. But Magnussen, some rumours that he might stick around in the back rooms at Haas, such as his relationship with them. And of course, we've already seen him try some American sports car and IndyCar outings as well. Actually, he did do an IndyCar race, didn't he, Magnussen?
Yeah, he's done IndyCar. He's well suited to IndyCar just because of his sort of nature, if you like. But the paddock liked him. He liked the paddock. But I'm not sure there's any opportunity for him to rush back, to be honest with you.
12 minutes, 23, 22, 21 seconds remain of free practice 2 at Sainz. Piastri, Tsunoda the top 3, Leclerc, Magnussen is 5th ahead of Hamilton, Bottas, Perez is 8th ahead of Norris, and Liam Lawson is 10th ahead of Hulkenberg, Esteban Ocon is 12th, Stroll, Colapinto, Alonso is 15th ahead of Gasly, Zhou Guanyu is 17th, Russell is 18th, he crashed at the start of the session, he is out and has been seen by the medical centre, he's physically okay, but it was a significant impact for the car. Max Verstappen with engine problems, quite troublesome times down at Red Bull and the reigning champion side of the garage, and Alex Albon, who had that big crash in FP1, crashing into Oliver Behrman. Williams have not been able to get that car fixed or out in time during this session, and what has been a bit of a messy start to the Mexico City Grand Prix weekend. Of course, we're already at round 20 of 24 in this longest season ever. It is the longest season ever, but you know what, I don't think to me, it hasn't felt like the longest season ever. And I think maybe we've been a bit lucky. If we'd have carried on with the Bahrain and the Saudi Arabia form book, where Verstappen was the man to beat, we've actually been treated to one of the better Formula One seasons in recent history.
I don't know, you've got more grey hairs than when you started.
That's just the stress of this job, honestly.
Talking about stressful jobs, Colapinto carrying the weight of Williams' run plan on his shoulders. They will be compromised off the back of Albon's crash, because obviously they'll share the data across both cars, and the fact that Colapinto hasn't been here either, it's not the end of the world. He gets up to speed quickly, but it just means that he doesn't have that sort of wealth of experience around this circuit to fall back on in terms of his feedback.
I'll tell you what, if Colapinto doesn't get a race seat next year, Williams will have one of the best reserve drivers on the grid.
It's a bit like Liam Lawson this year. You know, you can't come in and do what Liam Lawson did and then it just doesn't feel right, him then on the sidelines. You can't come in and do what Colapinto's doing and then have him on the sidelines. It's just not right, is it?
It's the sound of Carlos Sainz just easing off the throttle down to third gear as he comes through turns 1 and 2, take quite a lot of curb out through 3, gets a little kick on the rear, manages to control it, and then up to 6th, 7th gear, racing his way down towards turn 4. That's the second dose of DRS down that corner for you, then into the tight, almost 90-degree left-hander.
We can mention a Dakar again, because Carlos Sainz Sr. on the screen, who two-time world rally champion, of course, also likes his time in the Dakar as well.
He's another extraordinary guy who just hasn't lost the desire. I mean, the guy's over 60 and he's still winning Dakar rallies. It's absolutely incredible, and he's not. I suppose it's not a surprise that he's friends with Fernando Alonso, is it?
And on Carlos Sainz, I've said this before. I mean, Tom, how do you feel about his move to Williams next year? Obviously, it's not one he would have made by choice, but I don't feel sorry for Formula One drivers very often. But in this case, for a man as capable as Carlos Sainz, who's had an upward trajectory over the last couple of years, has been brilliant at pretty much every team that he's raced at following his Toro Rosso years, it's a big step back to Williams, who are not going to be on the level of Ferrari next year.
Yeah, I'd be devastated if I was him. I'm really sad just seeing the news and talking about it, and I touched on it with Andrew earlier on when we were talking about Sergio Perez having his time at Red Bull. You know, Carlos Sainz has done more than enough to earn his opportunity to be with a top team, and if you look at how hard he pushes Charles Leclerc and what a level playing field they've got at Ferrari, Carlos Sainz is a proper talent, and he's shown that all the way through his career. I remember when he was at Carlin in F3, and then, you know, 3.5 as well, very good in that Formula Renault Championship, then moved up through the ranks. You know, Carlos Sainz is somebody that has matured really well in Formula One and just continues to get better, I think, and is really unlucky. I'm just looking at the back of Lewis Hamilton's Mercedes. Something has caught on the rear wing there. It's a little bit of I don't know, string or fabric or something.
Just attached to the beam wing, the lower part of the rear wing. Not a visor strip, as we were having a heavy debate about in FP1 with Gabriele Bortoleto, but it is flapping on the back of Lewis Hamilton's Mercedes. It almost reminds me of a similar piece of fabric that happened caught around the halo of Nico Rosberg. No, it wouldn't have been the halo. I think it just caught around the front antenna of Nico Rosberg's Mercedes a few years ago. Can't remember the track. Want to say Belgium. Someone will pull me up for that, I'm sure. But it looks like a pretty harmless piece of string. Might come into the pits, and they'll try and untangle that from the rear of Lewis Hamilton's car. Still out on that test tyre in the long run phase as we finish off this free practice 2 session. Hamilton, 6 podiums here in Mexico. Hasn't been on the podium this season since Spa. A 2-time winner around this track as well, back in 2016 and 2019. Indeed, some of his absolute highs here, winning his 4th title here in 2017, following that up with his 5th title in 2018. But he comes here, Tom, off the back of, I think, is it fair to say, arguably one of his worst Formula One weekends in his career?
Yeah, I mean, he looked so dejected standing in the gravel, didn't he, on lap 2 last time out. Did you know that Hamilton, the only other driver to have won here in the field other than Verstappen?
No, it really is. Verstappen is his most successful track. He's a 5-time winner here, 2017, 18, and then the run from 2021 up until last year.
There's another proper racer, Emerson Fittipaldi. I did an interview with him and Mario Andretti, and it was really funny.
Just because a subtle name drop there,
yeah, because they literally regressed back to being sort of 25-year-old young racing drivers. The way they were talking about this Indy 500 that they were recounting was just sensational. That it was just the one-upmanship, and Emo in the end I think got the better of the conversation. But you know, 2 former world champions. Emo here is another racer through and through.
Fittipaldi was just standing in the back of the McLaren garage. Obviously, we have Pato O'Ward in for FP1, the IndyCar driver. He is technically classed as a reserve driver for McLaren in Formula One. I mean, how do you rate him? Could he be one to make the jump across the pond?
Do you know what? I think he could. I know Andrew maybe doesn't share my optimism, but there's one or two. I mean, that whole situation, it was an embarrassment of riches, because it's the Alex Palou saga that sort of allowed Pato O'Ward back into the frame. So Alex Palou, current IndyCar champion, was signed with Arrow McLaren, and you know, won't go into the ins and outs of what went wrong, but reneged on that contract and is currently being sued for that. But that's allowed Pato O'Ward to sort of elevate into the current space. But you know, they've got Gabrielle, who we spoke to in who joined us in first free practice. So you know, Zach is not he's not bad when it comes to attracting talent to that team.
Big news, big news. I think Andrew spotted it already, have you? No, big news. We've got medium tyres out there. We've got medium tyres. Lando Norris is on the medium. Fernando Alonso is on the medium. And Zhou Guanyu is on the medium tyre. And they've put them on. It's just good to see a bit of signage on the sidewall of a tyre again, isn't it?
Do you know what? This will be really good now to see just what sort of lap time they produce. 3 minutes left on the clock here in FP2, so this will be a short run. You can see the high flow paint, high vis. I can never say that.
Flow vis.
High flow vis. That's it. Yeah.
You want to say high vis, don't you?
High vis. He's wearing his high vis, and then that's sort of all up the left-hand side of the car, and they're just trying to see where the airflow is on that Arrow McLaren. On board with Lando Norris, now down to turn 1 as we switch to Fernando Alonso, who's also on the medium tyre.
Of course, these are the drivers that are allowed to switch on, having not done FP1, having sat out for the rookie drivers, Alonso, Zhou Guanyu, the other drivers out there on the medium tyre right now.
The thing about this is that some drivers have already run this tyre, because obviously what they've been doing is they've been taking a default 2024 tyre and comparing it with similar compound 2025 cars. So everybody who ran the C4 tyre in the Pirelli test runs has already run the medium in inverted commas, which is what these guys who are out at the moment, Alonso and Norris, are on. But of course, different time of day, different track. It's cleared up now. We don't know what fuel they're on. Whereas normally in a second practice session we get a sense of at least pretty close to normal relative pace, because they're all doing a qualifying simulation run. Don't know their exact fuel load, but it's, they're all running low. And then a high fuel race simulation. We've not had any of that today, so it's
so no long run corner.
No, mate. Sorry, no Eagles today.
Oh, that's a shame. That's a real shame. Should we play the theme tune anyway? I think give the people what they want, surely. Just over a minute left of free practice 2. Where has the time gone? 90 minutes in the blink of an eye for FP2. A slightly extended session for Pirelli tyre testing. Carlos Sainz, the fastest time that was set early doors. Now we can actually see, at least publicly, some of the runners on the medium tyre. Pirelli bringing in total the C5, the C4 and the C3 tyre as the regular running tyres for the rest of the weekend. The softest in the range, a little step softer to what we're used to seeing in Mexico. And the track really does start to evolve, especially after FP1. It's a track that's not really used too much. The low altitude often leads to very much a feeling of low grip amongst the cars as well. And Hamilton, though, is going to head down towards turn 1. The DRS slam shut under braking into the right-hander of turn 1. Then it's a quick flick into the left-hander of 2 before you're out again through the right-hander of 3. Once again, the rear end just stepping out slightly from the Mercedes, but Hamilton then on the medium tyre on a push lap right at the end.
Yeah, that's going to cost him. So when you lose traction on the exit of a slow corner and you have a straight thereafter, it costs you time all the way through to the next time that you decelerate, which is when you hit the brakes down for turn 4. So it's a big time loss, just what looks something so innocuous, big time loss. If you're wondering what happened to Lando Norris and Fernando Alonso, they set their fastest laps of the session so far on those medium tyres. Lando Norris, checker flag, in 5th place, and Fernando Alonso up to 11th with his lap time. Lewis Hamilton, yellow, sector 1 and 2. This is not the lap that he was hoping for.
Yeah, Alonso up on his personal best through sector 1. He'll come across the line behind Hamilton, who did find time in that final sector, but a little bit off the pace. Leclerc also bolted on the mediums, but didn't get across the line in time to do a one last flying lap. So all our eyes were on Hamilton, and now Alonso, who does cross the line 8/10 down in 11th place, and is the car to take the checkered flag. And we are done and dusted for free practice 2 as the sun slowly starts to set over this Mexico City Grand Prix circuit, the Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez, about 2,000 metres above sea level. And after lengthy Pirelli tyre testing, well, actually slightly truncated session for them, they wouldn't have gathered all the data they would have wanted with the lengthy red flag for George Russell's Mercedes. At the end of it, it's Carlos Sainz, fastest by 1/10 of a second, a 1:17.6. Oscar Piastri in second, Yuki Tsunoda up there once again for RB in FP2. Charles Leclerc and Lando Norris rounding out the top 5. Then it's Kevin Magnussen for Haas in 6th, ahead of Lewis Hamilton 7th. Valtteri Bottas in the Sauber is 8th. Sergio Perez on home soil finishes Friday in 9th, ahead of RB's Liam Lawson. Fernando Alonso taking the checkered flag, last car on the circuit for Aston Martin in 11th, ahead of Nico Hülkenberg's Haas. Esteban Ocon in the Alpine 13th. Lance Stroll 14th. Franco Colapinto, the sole remaining Williams in that session, doing the bulk of all the heavy lifting then in 15th, ahead of Pierre Gasly's Alpine 16th. Zhou Guanyu wasn't here for FP1, in the Sauber for FP2, finishing down in 17th. George Russell ended the session in 18th, but he did crash into the wall. A really big hit for George Russell, taken to the medical centre. He's physically okay, but it was a significant impact for both him and the car. So a lot of work for Mercedes overnight. A lot of work too for Max Verstappen in the Red Bull. He finished down in 19th spot with engine problems. Indeed, they cut his session short early. Floor off the car, driver out, lengthy work and concern. Looks down at Red Bull, and Alex Albon in the Williams finishing 20th and last. Didn't even get out for this session after his crash in FP1 with Oliver Behrman. So the Thai driver and the Williams team, another one with a bit of stress and pressure in these early stages, but that's Friday done.
Can I just say, watching Lando Norris do his practice start there, he ran tight to the right-hand side all the way up to turn one, really tight, braked really late, just testing how much grip he had all the way over if he was defending up into turn one, something he didn't do last week at Austin.
A little bit of practice maybe for what could come his way in at turn one ahead of 71 laps on Sunday. Well, Andrew, what have you made of Friday's running in Mexico City?
Not much, Harry. 2 big crashes to give us something to talk about, but honestly, it's one of those days where you watch Formula 1 cars go round and round and round for 2.5 hours and you wonder what was the point of it. I mean, obviously for the teams there was a lot of point, for Pirelli there was a lot of point, but for us I don't think there's anything we can take from that at all.
I'm quite impressed we did 90 minutes of that. Can you believe that's how long they used to be practice sessions?
Yeah, but I think it wasn't just that. It was bad enough then. I mean, now it's Pirelli tyre testing for 90 minutes.
We're all wishing for the sprint format of last weekend now, aren't we? Where you just cut straight into it.
I have to say, I think the communication around this has been poor. I think they should have said, basically, this session is going to be pointless. There's not going to be any running normally, because the press release didn't say that.
Well, Pirelli getting their last chance to gather some data ahead of their 2025 compound running. Well, that just about does it then for Free Practice 2. My thanks to Andrew Benson, to Tom Gaymore, to Gabriel Bortoletto as well, who joined us for FP1. You can join us again for FP3 tomorrow. We'll be on 5 Sports Extra. It's actually today now, isn't it? If you're in the UK, we'll be on air from 6:25 ahead of the session starting at 6:30, then qualifying on 5 Sports Extra later on. This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live.